Welcome to the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm Lee Riley, I'm a program associate in the Crop, Soil, and Environmental Science Department, in the Arkansas Discovery Farms program for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. This is our second webinar in the Arkansas Conservation Partnership Series, funded by Arkansas's NRCS and hosted by the U of A System Division of Agriculture. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about how to apply for programs offered by the United States Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service. If you're watching live, you can submit questions to the Q&A box. We will answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A segment at the end. Our speakers today are Adam Eades and Jamison Murry from the Natural Resource Conservation Service in Arkansas. They will share about the application process for NRCS programs. I want to share a little background about them. Adam Eades is a district conservationist with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. He has been with the agency for 13 years, of which 10 have been in the Paragould Field Service Center. Adam grew up farming rice and soybeans with his dad in Minturn, Arkansas. He worked for a few years for the Arkansas Forestry Commission after attending college at Arkansas State University, where he got a BS in biology and a master's in agriculture. Adam and family live in Paragould. Jamison Murry is a native of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, by way of the Altheimer and Wabaseka area, and is an alum of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, where he got a BS in agronomy. Jamison then got a Master's of Science at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville in wheat breeding and genetics, with an emphasis on remote sensing and high throughput phenotyping. Jamison began his USDA career through the 1890 Scholars Program, starting as an intern with several government agencies before becoming a soil conservationist with NRCS in Jefferson County's Field Service Center, and is currently Jamison is a resource conservationist in the Lonoke County Field Service Center. Thanks to Jamison and Adam. Today's webinar is going to be just a little different. Today, Adam and Jamison are going to tell us how a landowner can apply for conservation practices. Adam is portraying the role of an NRCS employee, while Jamison is portraying the role of a landowner seeking help with conservation practice. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam and Jamison.
Adam? Nice to meet you, man. Jamison Murry. I have a few acres outside of town, a little bit north of town, and I was wondering. I was talking to my neighbor. He's ranting and raving about NRCS and FSA and how you guys can help. I just really wanted to know, a little bit more about the programs or something that you may be able to offer me, and to be able to, be more productive on my property and be a little bit more conservative with what I have.
Jamison, it's good to meet you. We always love meeting new landowners in the county.
Absolutely, man.
And so let me share a few ways. Let me tell you a little bit about how we can get you started in helping achieve your goals on your farm. So NRCS offers technical assistance and writes conservation plans for landowners and operators, as well as providing financial assistance opportunities to help implement practices in their conservation plan.
Mm-hmm.
We have an office in almost every county in Arkansas. Our conservation plans are free and provide a detailed way to address existing resource concerns on your property. We as NRCS employees participate in that planning and also at times use partners or technical service providers as well that have expertise in the area of concerns.
Okay.
And to do that, we use a 9-step planning process that we'll start here today in the office.
Okay.
Depending on the situation and customer, we may start at different points within that process. So it's not always start at 1 and end at 9, but each step's important. Now, for us to be able to get started on the conservation plan and the application process, we need to make sure that you have farm records with Farm Service Agency, or FSA as we call them a lot. So FSA is an agency within USDA that is commonly located in the same building as an RCS. They are responsible for recording producer information and farm boundary information, such as farm and tract numbers, that serve as specific identifiers for the land that you own and or operate.
Gotcha.
They also oversee certain aspects of program eligibility, such as farm operating plans, adjusted gross income provisions, and highly erodible land and wetland conservation provisions that within that farm bill that we work under. And we'll talk more about those here in a minute.
Okay. Well, I just came from FSA a few minutes ago, and I was able to sign up my property. And I think I got a farm and tract number. I took them my deed and a couple of personal information documents, and I did a farm operating plan as well. But I can't remember my farm and tract number. I know they gave me one, but I can't remember it right off top. Could you help me with that a little bit?
Oh, that's great. It sounds like you've done a lot of the work already.
Yes.
So if not, we always work closely with FSA to help make that process as seamless as possible here at NRCS. Most often bringing your identification, your deed, entity information, if that pertains to you, and any leases are enough for FSA to get you going.
Okay.
It usually doesn't take too long to get a farm and tract number if you didn't already have one. However, that can vary depending on FSA workload.
Well, that's understood, man. That sounds so perfect, man. I think we're on the right track. I got some maps back at the shop. Do I need to go get them, or should I stay here, or would you have them in your documents, or how should we move forward with that?
Well, I think I can save you a trip. We don't necessarily need to go get those. Let's use our program called Conservation Desktop that we use here to physically locate that farm, and we can find that farm and tract number.
Okay.
So once we locate it here, I can identify from the common land unit layer that FSA oversees what in fact that existing farm and tract number is, assuming that you have one. There it is. It looks like farm 999 tract 888.
That looks to be the one, man.
Okay. So I'll send a quick message to FSA and we'll request a copy of your producer farm data report.
Okay.
And that will detail the farms and tracts that you're associated with. And we use this to ensure that everything is up to date, on our end for the conservation plan and the application we're going to look at. So now that I found your farm and tract number, let's pull up a map and we'll use it for some preliminary planning. So tell us a little bit about your land and your objective.
Well, first off, let's go here. My most important objective is a little bit of this regenerative farm practices, and I'd also like to improve my soil health in that area for my cropland. And I think, as you can see here, man, I think that's fields 1, 3, and 4. And then my second objective, I would love to improve my produce in my garden, and I like to grow for the local area and go to the farmer's market as well. But that's a little bit of that unnumbered area behind the house there, that little spot, little patch behind the house. And then my third objective, I would love to also hear some recommendations on some pasture land. And I think that's fields 7, 8, and 10. I'm not able to get to that like I'd like to. So I think I'm gonna lease that out to someone this year, but I would love some feedback on there. And also my forest land, I would definitely entertain some feedback for my forest land and the associated wildlife habitat. And you'll kind of see that mixed up throughout there, that tree cover that you see on that map there too. But I'm also interested in how I might receive some cost share. I know my neighbor was definitely telling me about how you guys can help me financially. So I would be interested in learning how I can receive some of that cost share and implement some of these recommendations that you may have. And also, I would love for you to come out to the farm, man. We would love to have you boots on the ground to see exactly what we have going there. We have a pretty good, interesting operation, but if you can get there, would it just be you to come, or would you need access? Do I necessarily need to be there? How would we go about that?
Yeah, well, we're so glad you come to see us, Jamison. With all this going on in our farm, I think we've got a lot that we can offer you that may benefit you and your land.
Perfect.
We don't come on your property unless we have your permission to start with. And then we always call before we come.
Okay.
And then usually it's either one person or a small team that makes the visits to your farm. So let me run through how we can help. So the conservation plan we would prepare is your document, as you are the decision maker in that. We just offer alternatives to your existing situation or your current management. So it's a dynamic document that can change over time as things change on your farm or your objectives change. Our planning and assessments that we'll do will guide you in which program or programs will best fit your needs.
Okay.
But it looks like, from what I'm hearing, we may want to discuss the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or we call it EQIP sometime.
I got you.
And it sounds like we'll be working on these concerns for the first time. So that may be one that we want to start with.
No doubt. Well, that EQIP program, it definitely sounds like the right way to go for my operation, but I really don't know how it works. My neighbor tried to explain it to me, but he's not too good at that, man. So how does it necessarily work? And do I sign up and then get funded, or when can I sign up? Can I sign up today?
Oh, great question. So yeah, we can get you signed up today.
Okay.
And so we have two major types of EQIP.
All right.
Traditional EQIP and Act Now EQIP. Okay. So let me share a few of the major points for each of those. So traditional is a continuous application process where there's a sign up deadline that's set, typically between October and December, as that's kind of the beginning of our fiscal year. And all applications are assessed and ranked against each other in order that we can select and fund those applications that have the greatest environmental benefit. And this is a great way to ensure that we're getting the best applications funded. However, the wait time from application to potential funding, can be a while on that one. Now, the Act Now, that's a new type sign up that was authorized to allow for assisting producers faster than we previously could with that traditional method.
Right.
This allows for you to apply for practices that national or state leadership has identified an immediate need for. And if a ranking threshold score that is set for that sign up is exceeded, and funds are available at that time, then we can go ahead and select that for funding. It can be much quicker than the traditional EQIP.
Okay.
This is more of a first come, first serve type sign up. In this instance, we'll be looking more at a traditional application.
Okay.
However, if an Act Now for any of these practices that we choose to install, we'll reach out and let you know on that.
Okay.
So when an EQIP program application is funded, here's what happens. We work with you to prepare a contract and a schedule with a schedule that meets your needs. And then we design and prepare to implement the practices within the contract according to NRCS standards and spec.
All right.
The schedule or timeline for that plan or contract could be as short as up to a year if there's not many practices, or if it's pretty complex, up to maybe 5 and then a maximum of 10 years for that. And we have field staff that'll help you both on the technical side of implementation as well as the programmatic side of contract management.
Okay. Well, all that sounds so good. Let's get this application started. I really would love to get started as soon as possible. So let's start today, man. Let's go ahead and get started with this application.
Great. Well, let's go over the application and eligibility.
Sure, man.
And then after we review, if you decide to apply, it doesn't take long at all to fill these forms out.
Okay.
So we have the NRCS 1200, and that's our conservation program application. So keep in mind, landowners or operators with control of land can apply.
Okay.
They're all ag producers. This 1200 application helps define how you want to apply and important certifications, such as if you are eligible for specific historically underserved categories, such as socially disadvantaged, limited resource, and beginning farmer.
Okay.
Also, veteran status will be documented to potentially give some preference points to your application. These statuses can set the level of cost share if a contract is awarded.
That's you.
Yeah. Then we go on to the SF 1199A, which is a direct deposit form.
Okay.
If you would like to take this to the bank, you can and bring it back, or you can fill it out now if you have that information. All program payments are made via direct deposit unless a waiver is sought. So most of what we do is direct deposit. And then we move on to some FSA forms here. The CCC 941 average adjusted gross income, certification and consent to disclosure of tax information. So that's an annual certification. And this form verifies that your annual adjusted gross income is below the set amount for the program to be able to receive assistance.
Okay.
The level for NRCS programs is currently $900,000, and that's averaged over a set 3-year period. And then we have the AD 1026. This is the highly erodible land conservation and wetland conservation certification. So this form verifies that you're in compliance with highly erodible land and wetland provisions, and it can also serve as a request for NRCS to evaluate your farm to make a wetland or highly erodible determination if one's not been completed.
Okay. A few forms that, I mean, doesn't seem too tough on me. It sounds easy enough to me. Will you happen to be able to help me out with some of these things? I want to make sure I'm doing this right the first time. So will you be there to kind of hold my hand and walk me through some of these things?
Yes, sir. Every step of the way.
Well, sounds perfect, man. Let's go ahead and get these documents pretty much turned in. But what happens after that?
All right. Well, since this is a traditional type application,
yes, sir.
Here's what will happen. So our best projection is the next sign up deadline will be in November.
Okay.
You know, this is subject to change, but I like to have all my customers apply no later than October each year, so they don't miss that sign up deadline. And you know, we'll have plenty of time to get your conservation plan finalized, and you can decide what alternatives you'd like to proceed with in your application for financial assistance.
Okay.
And then after this sign-up deadline happens, we will be able to finalize your assessment and ranking in preparation for the deadline set for those actions. So our program staff after that point can then begin selecting for funding based off of the scores and the funding or the money that's available. Let's arrange a day to meet in the field with your operator on your row crop portion of your farm to talk through practices that can be applied to help save your soil and also maybe save them some money.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a plan of saving money.
Yeah, so at the end of that meeting, we can move on and we can look at your garden area since that's your second priority. And we'll share opportunities to increase your production, maybe by improving soil health there, and even maybe extending your growing season. And then you will also, after that, move right on and look at your pasture land and see what we can do to help you improve that.
Okay. It sounds like a plan. I'm let me be honest with you. I'm not the expert especially when it comes down to this forestry. I have this forestry land. I'm not so sure what to do with it. I just know I really would love a nice productive stand of timber, and I enjoy wildlife. Me and my son, we definitely enjoy going hunting. So do you have some recommendations there? Could you introduce me to someone, or could we kind of could you be the bridge to someone else that I could possibly talk to, a forester maybe, to see what we can do about that land?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we'll get you connected with a forester that works for the Arkansas Department of Agriculture Forestry Division to plan a time to come write a management plan on your forest land. And then, you know, for your wildlife objective, we can also work with the private lands biologist for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission to help let them write a plan for the wildlife habitat portion. And just keep in mind that all these land uses can be addressed through the EQIP program. And this one application you fill out can be used to pursue financial assistance to implement practices within your conservation plan. As far as the changes in your conservation plan, that conservation plan is your document. You know, you are the decision maker. So we're just going to offer those alternatives to that existing situation or management that we see in the field. And we'll give you ample time to decide on alternatives that meet your needs, given that we can work that into set program deadlines since we're going to be applying for EQIP. And remember, it's a dynamic document that can change over time as things change in your operation or your objectives change.
So I definitely can change my conservation plan. Perfect. Well, this all seems so perfect, man. It seems so wonderful. The process just is amazing. I was talking to my sister about it this morning after speaking with my neighbor, and I was ranting and raving about how I was headed down here, and she lives in Desha County. And she was wondering if she could kind of take part in this as well. She has some property that she would love to improve as well, but should I send you down there to talk to her? Does she talk to someone that may be a little bit more local to her? How does that work?
Well, that's a great question too. So we typically work requests for technical assistance and financial assistance applications in the county where that ground is physically located. However, if you have land in multiple counties, we have some programs where the lead office will be where the majority of that land resides. You know, another reason that we try to work the request in the county where the ground lies is because of the different funding sources that we're trying to utilize. In Arkansas, counties get a portion of their money through local accounts just for land in that county. And not every state is this way, and priorities can even vary from county to county. But you can never go wrong starting at your local field service center closest to your residence and receive guidance on how to proceed from there, and they can point you in the right direction.
Well, perfect. That sounds good, man. I'll be sure it makes more sense now that you explained it to me, that she can actually go and speak with somebody that's a little bit more local to her. And since she, lives in DeShay County and we're a little bit far away from each other, but that's my big sister. I'd love to make sure everything's taken care of on her property. But as far as the conservation plan, everything sounds amazing, but I really want everything to be able to fit her needs best. So it sounds excellent, man. Where do we move from here?
Well, great. So as far as your sister's concerned, when we get done here, I'll give you the contact information.
Okay.
For the district conservationists down there in DeShay County.
Perfect.
And that way she can get in touch with them.
Well, this sounds excellent, man. This is perfect. When can we expect you guys to come out and visit?
Well, how does next week sound?
Man, looks like I believe next Tuesday will be perfect with me.
Tuesday at 9. How does that sound?
Okay, perfect, man. We'll catch you soon, Adam.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in and learning about some common discussion questions of your first visit with NRCS staff. We want to help you meet your goals and offer you the best advice that we can. And don't forget that you can easily locate your specific field service center on the web by searching USDA Service Center Locator. And our staff there will help you meet your needs.
Thanks so much, Adam and Jamison. We really appreciate the wealth of information that you shared for us. We're now ready to answer your questions. Please continue to enter your questions in the Q&A box if you have any, if you haven't gotten a chance to get those typed in yet. All right, here's a question from the audience. What languages do you offer? Specifically want to know services in Spanish.
I can take that one. So we have an LEP program to where we can request documents in those languages. So we encourage you to multiple languages there. So I would say work with your local field service center and we can get you taken care of. We have posters posted and we can get you that information that you need. Great.
So are all programs the same across the states and counties?
Take that one.
All right, I can take that one. No, they're actually not across all states and counties. What we would recommend is that you become actively involved into your local work groups, and those actually communicate with NRCS and also our conservation districts to actually pinpoint the needs that would be in your county and in your local area.
Are there specific programs that target female or minority or small farms?
Great question. So for your question about females being a protected class or minority, they are not within our programs at this point. However, as I mentioned, socially disadvantaged, beginning farmer, other categories are. So great question. I hope that answers.
And you guys have service in every county in the state, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yep. Okay. All right. Where can someone go to find contact information for the local NRCS office?
We have a website, and actually we'll be sure to post a link to that website. Throughout the slideshow, it was one slide that you will be able to locate your most local service center. But it would be, we'll be sure to post that as soon as we finish our presentation today. That can definitely be posted and sent to you all.
Would either of you be able to explain the EQIP ranking a little more in detail?
Yes, I can take that. So we're currently using a process called CART, Conservation Application Ranking Tool. And so within that assessment and the practices, so what's currently going on the farm, as well as the practices that are being planned to put in, as well as answering a set of ranking questions pertaining to benefits that those practices are going to provide, come up with a ranking score. So everybody with the traditional process is ranked against each other, and then those Scores are from the high score to the lowest. We fund moving from high to low until the money's gone for that fund account. Good question.
Is that ranking criteria shared? You know,
That's a good question. I believe it is. And if not, that is open to, as a person works with the field office, they are more than welcome to work with that district conservation or that employee in there during that ranking process.
great. How often can someone sign up to for programs, and do they have to sign up every year?
That would be great. That's a great question, actually. So how often would it be to sign up, or how many times can you sign up? We accept applications throughout the year. However, our application process they all have a deadline date. As far as an EQIP program, we have different initiatives that come out. So we can definitely sign up for different initiatives or put you in different funding pools. However, you cannot what we call double dip. You cannot have the same practices that may be in one program. You cannot have those practices be funded in an additional program like our conservation stewardship program, and they kind of overlap in some practices. But those applications can be placed up until our deadline.
And if I could add to
Sure.
that, we do, once you take that application, that is going to roll over from year to year until you decide to say, you know, I'm done trying. But with the Act Now, that is, since it's more of a first come, first serve, we do ask for new applications to be signed for those since they are time sensitive.
Yes, no problem.
Great. So when should someone come back to NRCS to update their conservation plan? Is there a schedule, list of circumstances? You know, what does someone need to know have a technical or conservation plan reevaluated?
Well, there's no set schedule because that person knows more about the changing things going on their farm. I would say it would be up to them if they see something that's changed, or anytime they want to come back in and revisit that and go over it. We would love to do that, but that's going to be depending on changes on their farm and as they see need.
Okay. All right. Does someone come and check out the work after it's completed to evaluate the effectiveness?
Yes, absolutely. And so that's whether it's a management practice or a structural practice. We do come out and check from a systematic point of view how that practice is upholding, whether it's, like I said, structural or management. We definitely want to make sure that they are up to NRCS standards and specs as far as installation, whether it's pipe sizes or anything else. We want to make sure that it's going to be there for the lifetime, lifetime of that specific practice. So we do come out and check afterwards to make sure that everything is working how it needs to be.
Great. How long might it take to hear about funding after they apply? Is there like a rule of thumb, or?
Well, that's a great question. And that can be with the traditional process because of the sign up deadline and the ranking process. Sometimes that can span an amount of time. Now, at the start of every fiscal year, we'll send out deferral letters that explains we didn't have enough funding to pick your application up. And that gives you the option to check in with the Field Service Center and see what you might be able to do to improve that application or make changes. Other than that, we always, because we're dealing with so many applications in these field offices in Arkansas, we always welcome anytime that a person thinks about calling the field office and checking in where we at in this process. Please do that, because what happens is, like, through the year, we could not have funding one minute, and then the next minute there could be funding coming from other places that could pick up that application. So phone calls throughout the year or contact is sometimes difficult for the field offices. So we encourage that connection. And then we always connect at the start of that next fiscal year to try to connect and let you know that we need to make some changes or we just didn't get enough funding. It's a good question.
Do either of you know what the definition of a beginning farmer is? Like, what's the time frame that someone's considered a beginning farmer?
Yeah. So great question. That is a 10-year period. So 10 years of consecutive farming, no more than 10 consecutive years of farming is that definition.
Great. So I've only got one question left, unless anybody else in the audience has any more questions that we've not covered. But how do you determine what payment we'll receive for the practices that we apply for?
Well, that's a good question. So we have economists that work currently in a tri-state area. I believe it's Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, maybe off on that by state, but they get together and they take in, try to gather average project cost for, say, a foot of irrigation pipeline or a foot of fence. And then they come together and they create these cost lists. So we offer a payment rate per unit of a practice installed. So if you get a contract, going into it, if I complete 100 feet of fence, I'm going to get paid this amount.
Great. We have had the question come in here just now. What can they apply for multiple EQIP contracts for separate farms?
Sure. So what I like to tell producers or tell landowners, likely, especially with the new initiatives that come out, we definitely would like to have an application for that initiative. But if you have something that would be, we like to put the land units on one application. But if you have an issue or have another resource concern or another landowner issue that we would need another application, we can do just that. And however, with the new initiatives, you definitely want to put in another application within each new initiative. Sometimes we don't necessarily need those things. So I would say contact your local NRCS office for that. And if you would like for us to come out to your property to assess multiple land units, multiple fields, we would definitely do that. And that could be applied to one application. And then if something else comes up and a new initiative comes out and you say, hey, I have this resource concern or this is eroding over here and it's maybe too late for it or a deadline over with this other application or our regular EQIP, well, you have this Act Now application in that we'll be able to assess that resource concern as well. So multiple applications can be submitted.
You guys are a wealth of information. This is awesome. Thank you so much. How can extension agents partners work with NRCS conservationists? And do you ever use extension personnel for technical service? And then I've got another one that's coming after that.
Well, I'm so glad you asked that about extension. We could not do what we do without them. I know in my home county, they are invaluable partners through outreach, through just getting the word out, their customer base and their contact methods that they have available to producers in the county. We just partner together and you can get more done together than you can separate. So yes, we work a lot with county extension agents and this webinar has been brought to you because of them and their partnership with us. So yes, and then we also work with other entities, private, public. We try to leverage our funds, our staff with all other resources available.
We would not be in NRCS without our partners.
That's great. Is there a minimum acreage for a conservation program?
No, not that I know of. It's not a minimum acreage, especially with the new popular thing of urban agriculture coming about. We're definitely seeing smaller and smaller acreage that we're addressing our resource concerns on. So no, there wouldn't be a minimum requirement.
All right, this is maybe a hypothetical, but what happens if you don't complete a project?
That's a great question. So with the contract management, we try to work with everybody to complete those practices. However, you don't have to know the future to get into programs with us. We have options like cancellation. If you fall on hardship, whether it's health, Things just change since the signing of that contract. We work with people to work through those needs for cancellations. But we make every effort, and we make every effort to get those completed. However, we do allow for changes, extenuating circumstances that arise after the signing of that contract.
You touched on special classes earlier. What about veterans? Are they any special programs for them?
We don't have programs, but yeah.
So what we do now is we have within certain fund codes that we we put people's applications in to compete. There can be veterans preference points there. So we're specifically trying to target people that are coming out of the service that also have that beginning farmer status. We want to help them get into agriculture and conserve their farms.
I think you may have touched on this just a little bit in a previous question, but I want to make sure that I get everybody's questions answered sufficiently for them. But so is EQIP a one-time application, or can you apply more than once for like different phases of a project?
Can you say different phases?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is it depends on how many land units you're trying. EQIP is traditionally kind of focused on a farm level because there are different things going on, like practice caps within contracts, things like that. So I think that's more of a specific question you'd want to sit down and work with your local field office on, because priorities can change in different counties. Local ed work groups can set practice caps at different levels to achieve different benefits. So that's a very specific question. However, for the most part, that one application on that land unit will carry over in that traditional continuous application process until you say that you're ready to quit trying for that funding.
Great. And I think this similarly, we kind of maybe touched on this, but someone audits the projects. Are there any types of audits that are conducted?
Yeah, so after completion of the practices, you can just contact us, and what we'll do, we will send out either us ourselves as soil conservationists, or we would have our soil con technicians and silver engineer technicians. We would have them come out and certify those practices, like I said, whether they're structural, whether it's a reservoir, or even what something like cover crops. We would come out and certify that they are installed properly or planted properly, whether it's with the cover crop, whether they're planted properly, and then also terminated at the specifications that we have. And we would provide all of the information of how to install, our specs, what we're looking for within job sheets as you sign up your application is transitioned into a contract. We will get that information to you, so you won't be led blind. All of this, we're walking you through every bit of this, and we welcome you to come back into our office if you have any questions, or even give us a phone call as you're installing these practices. We would definitely want to be involved, just like we did in our skit, to make sure that everything is done right the first time.
How can people find out about new and upcoming programs? You guys have a newsletter, publication, emails?
Well, that's a great question. That's always something we're trying to get the word out better. So we always have local outreach, but then we have news releases that go to the Associated Press for any big sign up that we have. And we encourage the press to share that. There's also, we partner closely with conservation districts. And so like in my county, we have a social media presence for the district that helps us get the word out. So it's a mixed bag of things that we do, but sometimes that's difficult getting the word out. Media is always changing, so we're trying to adapt, but good question.
I think if we stay here long enough, we're going to cover every enumerated conservation. All right. One thing you might help the audience understand what you mean when you say socially disadvantaged.
Yeah.
So typically your historically underserved audiences, within socially disadvantaged, we're looking at minority groups, and we already kind of touched on the women in ag. We don't have that one as of yet, but as far as socially disadvantaged, looking at minority groups, whether they're Native American, African American, whatever minority groups you can think of, we're pretty much there, and they fall under the umbrella of historically underserved. So likely, we all know the history of historically underserved. So as you get into your offices, we do have that not correctly, but very detailed and outlined in your eligibility process, that you, whether from us, whether it be from NRCS or whether it be from FSA, we both can get you an exact answer whether you fit in. Now, you will be able to self-certify as such in your application. That is a section in your application that you can do that. So if you feel as such that you're part of that historically underserved, you can self-certify, and then we can go from there.
And I'm going to combine a couple of questions into one here. We've got a couple specifically asking if land clearing and then also fencing, if either of those are covered under conservation practices that you guys would provide funding for.
That brings up a great question. Yeah. So land clearing used to be in our EQIP cost list. It's no longer there for various reasons. However, so we have a list of approved conservation practices that can be in the conservation plan. And then we also have a list that has that's state specific that we spend EQIP money on. So we don't really limit that list too much, but there are some things not in it, such as land clearing. Fence we can use for multiple purposes. We can use fence to exclude from water bodies. We can use fence to break grazable areas from grazable areas so that we can improve the rest time on that paddock. We can also use fence for use exclusion for animal health reasons.
All right. I think the questions have finally wound down. And I apologize if I didn't get to any. Our staff was helping behind the scenes, making sure that I saw all of them. So if I didn't get to your question, I do apologize, but this has been recorded and will be made available to everyone. And if you have any questions, Ms. Rita shared her email address in the chat earlier, but you will all get an e-build link to this, and we'll also include contact information to reach out with any questions that you might think of after the fact. I know I frequently do that. And with that, I'm going to would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I thoroughly enjoyed the Q&A session. Lots of great questions. Really valued the knowledge of our guests, and I learned a lot as well. So thank you for joining us today for our second webinar in the Arkansas Conservation Partnership Series about getting started with NRCS. A huge thank you to Adam and Jamison for walking us through the process. You guys did phenomenal. Thank you to NRCS for funding this webinar, and for the awesome production team at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service for hosting it. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. Feel free to reach out to any of us with further questions. Watch your email and also for email and social media for future webinars in the series. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.